Hello everyone, welcome to this tutorial by Zebra Code. In this tutorial, we are going to look at the for loop in C++. This is a part of the iterations series in C++. What is a for loop? A for loop is a control structure that causes a statement or groups of statements to repeat. The for loop has a simple format. Its main function is to repeat statement or statements while condition remains true. In addition to that, the for loop provides places to specify an initialization instruction and an increase instruction. The for loop is simply designed to perform a repetitive action with a counter in a program. The counter can be an increment or a decrement. We will see that later on in the video. The format for a for loop in C++ is similar to the format for a for loop in some other programming languages. We have the for loop. In the for loop, we have init statement, which is for initialization, then the condition, which is to be tested, and the iteration expression, which is either a decrease or an increase. Then comes the body of statement or statements, or the code that is to be executed within the for loop. We can see this in a clearer picture on the next slide. This is a diagrammatic representation of the for loop structure in C++. I have labeled them from 1 to 7 and they are color coded. I will explain them now. Here the for loop starts with the first statement, which is number 1. Then comes the opening and closing brackets, which is number 2. Inside the opening and closing brackets are some expressions. The first one, which is now number 3, is the init statement. That is the initialization statement. And it is also important to see the semicolon that is added to it. There are two. One is after the initial statement or the initialization statement. Then the second one is after the condition or the test. So I have grouped them together and they are here listed as number 4. Number 5 is the condition or the test which is to be performed. Then comes number 6, which is the iteration expression or the increase or decrease based on what is supplied. Then number 7, which is the opening curly bracket and the closing curly bracket. I have grouped both of them together. In between them, we have the body of statement or statements or the code that is to be executed. But how does this actually work? What happens here is simple to understand. Number 1 or number 3 here, which is the initialization, is performed or executed. In other words, an initial value is set for a counter variable. This process is done only once. After that comes the condition. The condition is checked. If the condition is true, the loop continues. But if the condition is false, the loop ends and it will skip the statement. That is, if this condition is false, this statement will not be executed. It will skip it. The third part is the statement. The statement is performed or executed. This can be one statement or multiple statements. Like in this case here, we have one statement or multiple statements here, or the code that will be executed. This is always in a block of a code inside the opening and the closing curly brackets. Inside is the final part of it, which is here. Whatever is specified, the increase part of it is executed and the loop goes back to the second step, which is the condition here. It checks it again. Now that we have seen this part of it, we will look at it in depth later in the video. Here is an example of a for loop in C++. I have a code snippet here and the output or the result. The for loop statement. Here an integer is declared and is s, which is initialized to 0. The s is checked here whether it's less than or greater than 5. Then it is increased here. That is the increment, which means s++. Now here is the body, cout number, the s. So we have only one statement right here. And when we run this code, this will be the output. It will output this result. It is possible to have nested loops in C++. What is actually a nested loop? A loop that is inside another loop is called a nested loop. Very often, a loop appears inside another loop in a program. And here is an example of such a situation. For integer a equals 0, a is less than 12, a++. Now we have another for loop here. For integer b equals 0, b is less than 12, b++. Now we have some statements. Do something again. This is a good example of a nested loop in C++. It is possible to omit some expressions in our for loop in C++. Here, omitting expression of the for loop and this part of it, which is the initialization, we are going to omit it. You can omit the initialization expression from inside the for loop parentheses if it has already been performed or if no initialization is needed. For example, we have two variables here, int number equals 1, int mass figure equals 8. Now we are going to write our for loop. For the initialization now is omitted, but we still have to add the semicolon. Number, which is the condition, less than or equals maximum figure or mass figure, number plus plus. Here we say cout number, and the function here is number multiplied by number, the end line. This is the body of the statement for the for loop. Now, omitting expressions for the for loop, the update part of it, we can omit the update as well. You may omit the update expression from inside the for loop parentheses if it is being performed elsewhere in the loop or if none is needed. Performed elsewhere is highlighted in red as to show how important it is in terms of explaining this concept. We also have here two variables, int number equals to 0, int mass figure equals 15. Now the for loop. For the initialization is omitted here. Number less than or equals mass figure. The update is also omitted. Usually the update doesn't take any semicolon, so it's just left out here now. And the body of the statement or the statement that is to be executed in the body part of the for loop, cout number, number multiplied by number, end line. But we have to specifically say here number plus plus. Because we omitted the update here, we have to specify it here. This part of number increment is similar to the while loop. Now, omitting all three expressions of the for loop. It's possible to omit all the three expressions of the for loop in C++, but there is a danger associated with that. You may choose to omit the initialization, the test, and update expressions from inside the for loop parentheses. This would cause an infinite loop. That is the danger associated to it. That is, as leaving out the test expression would mean there is no way for the program to terminate. C++ doesn't have a built-in functionality to terminate a program in a for loop if the test expression is omitted. For example, we have a for loop here. The initialization is omitted, the test condition is omitted, and the update is omitted. This program will certainly run. However, it will give you an infinite loop. The reason for that is the test condition or the test expression is omitted and there is no way to stop the program from running. So the test will always be true. There is no way to make it false so that the program will stop executing. That is the danger that is associated with the omission of all the three expressions, especially the test condition part of it. We can use a comma-separated for loop in C++. Comma-separated variables in a for loop, and what does that mean? In C++, we can use commas to separate variables in a for loop. Multiple variables can be used inside a for loop. And what does that mean? What that means actually is, inside our for loop, we can have multiple variables, just like in this example, for int n equals to 0. Now we have a comma, m equals 0. This is a semicolon. What that means is these two are the same. They both constitute the initialization part of the for loop. N is less than or equals to 8. This is the test condition. Both n++ and m form the increment or update part of the for loop in this example. The do something represents whatever statement we want to implement here. For loop also has a shorthand form in C++. The for loop shorthand form expression in C++, we can use the shorthand form expressions for the for loop. These can take different data types. It is range based and it has been available since C++ 11. Same but more readable than traditional for loop. For example, string continent. We have an array here which is of data type strings, and we have initialized it with some elements. We have Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, and South America as the elements of the array. Now we are going to use a for loop to loop through the array. We have here for auto names. Auto is now a data type here. Names is a variable which we have set, and we want to loop through the continents. What this actually means is, for auto data type names in continents, see out names. And this will print out this result: Africa, Asia, Australia, Europe, North America, and South America. This method of running a for loop or writing a for loop in C++ is clean, simple, and easy to read. Now let's take a quick look at the three types of loop in C++. In the previous videos, I mentioned they are for, while, and do while loop. Now, the for loop is a pretest loop. That is, it tests its expression before it performs an iteration. 2, the while loop is also a pretest loop. That is, it tests its expression before each iteration. Number 1 and number 2 are both pretest loops. That is the for loop and the while loop. Number 3, the do while loop, as we saw in another video, is a post-test loop. What does that mean? That means its expressions are tested after each iteration. In other words, it tests its expression after each iteration, not before. So the other ones do it before, that's why they are pretest, while the third one does it after each iteration. Now, with this explained, let's actually write some code with a for loop in C++. Alright, now it's time for us to program the for loop in C++. That is, let's write some code that will demonstrate the use of the for loop in C++. To do that, I have created a file in Sublime Text. You can use any text editor of your choice to run your C++ program. And I named the file forloop.c++. I have entered here the basic C++ application code to run a program. It has a main function. Now I'm going to name this one example1. say a program to run for loop in C++. For int I equals 0, semicolon, I is less than or equals 8, semicolon, I plus plus. Now the body of the for loop. See out. The counting is I, end line. Save it. So what we have here is a for loop that we actually check this condition. The initialization here is integer I equals 0. We set it to 0. Now we're going to run this condition. I is less than or equals to 8. Then update I plus plus. See out the counting is I. So let's save it, compile and run it. G plus plus, run for loop dot cpp. Great, the compilation was done successfully. Now let's run it. Run for loop. Great, it was run successfully. Says here the counting is 0 and it runs to the counting is 8. So this was based on the condition that we set in our for loop. Now let's run another example. Call it example 2. Say a for loop to check a variable outside of the loop. A for loop to check a variable outside of the loop. What we are going to do here is to set a variable outside the loop, then use the for loop condition to check the variable. And to do that, I will say here int quantity equals 20. Let's initialize it to 20. Now the for loop. For int a equals 0. A is less than or equals quantity a plus plus. Now the body of the loop. See out. The quantity is a end line. Save it. Let me quickly put this one in a comment so that it will not be printed. If define on define it, and if here. Great. So this part of it will not be printed, though it's still visible in our code. Only the last part of it, which we want to test, will be printed on the terminal. So save it. Let's compile and run it again. Great. It was compiled successfully. Now let's run it. Great. So if you look at it here now, it says the quantity is 0, quantity is 1, and it printed it till the quantity is 20. That was based on the test condition that we specified in our for loop. And what was that test condition again? Here we specifically said for integer a equals 0, if a is less than or equals quantity a plus plus. A of course is less than quantity here. Now that is why it updates until it got to 20. That is another way of using a for loop in C++. Let's do another one. I'll call this one example 3. An interactive for loop application in C++. Here we are going to create an application that will allow a user to enter data. I will say here int n equals 0, cout, enter a number and press enter. Now cin what? Cin, because n is the variable that we have declared here. Now it's time to do the for loop. For int I equals 0. Or we can set it to 1. For int I equals 1, I is less than or equals n I plus plus. And the body of the for loop, cout I. Or we can put a space here as well, so that there will be a space between the numbers. Save it. Now let's run our code. Before then we need to compile it. Great, it was compiled successfully. Now let's run it. Great, it was run successfully. Now it says enter a number and press enter. I'm going to enter 6. Hit enter. Great, it's printing now 1 to 6. 1 2 3 4 5 6. This is based on the condition that we set in our for loop. What was that condition again? We said here for int I equals 1, I is less than or equals n. N is the variable here, or the entry that the user is going to enter for the cin, then I plus plus. So it updates until it gets to 6, which is the number that I entered. So this is another way of using a for loop in C++. This was done in an interactive way. So let me move this one to the bottom so that this part of it will not be printed on the screen again while we do the next example. I'm going to do another example. I will call it example 4. Using comma separated variables in a for loop. We talked about this before. Now let's actually demonstrate it. For int a equals 0, comma b equals 25, semicolon, a is less than or equals b, semicolon, a plus plus, comma b minus minus, and the body of the for loop, cout number b end line. We can also do an if statement here. If b equals 15, then do what? Break. What do we actually have here? What we have here is easy to understand. We are using comma separated variables inside our for loop And we have said int a equals 0, comma, b equals 25. This part of it is the initialization. This is a comma, not a semicolon. With the semicolon here, it means these two are the same. Now, this is the test condition. And after the test condition, the update here, we have a++, again, separated with a comma from the b minus minus. So a++, comma, b minus minus, they are also the same. They are the update part of the for loop. Now we see here number, then b. End line. The test condition here is if b equals 15, break. So actually, the right part of this for loop will be executed. It will start from 25 and it will be counting down. When it gets to 15, it will break, because that is the if statement that we have here. Let's save it, compile it, and run it. Now I'm going to compile it. Great, it was compiled successfully. Now let's run it. Great. Look at it here, the result, number 25, number 24, number 23. It was counting down until it got to 15. And when it got to 15, it stopped, because the condition we specified there with the if statement is when it gets to 15, break. So when it actually got to 15, it broke out of the for loop. It was true until it got to 15, then it broke, it became false. This is another way of using a for loop in C++. But if you actually look at it, these expressions, it was the right hand part of it, which is the b minus minus, that was implemented. Let's do another example, and I will call it example 5. This time we are going to use the shorthand form of the for loop, using the shorthand form of the for loop in C++. Let me move this one down so that the other part of it will not be printed. This feature has been possible since C++ 11. If you are using older versions of C++, you may not be able to do this. So let's try it. And I'm going to first of all create an array of data type string. String students. Let's enter some data in there. Barry, Helen, Emeka, Muyua, Adams, Lee, Gupta. That should be okay for now. Now we are going to do the for loop. So auto I colon students, the body of the for loop. See out I end line. End line. And what is actually happening here? What is happening here is easy to understand. We have a variable of data type string and its name students. We assign it this data, and we are using the for loop to iterate through the array. For auto is of data type, and I is our variable here. We are actually going to loop through the student array. So see out I, it will iterate through the students array. Auto, we automatically detect the data type for it. So we don't have to specifically say this is the data type. Auto does that for us. And once again, auto has been possible since C++ 11. Now let's save our code, compile it and run it. Great, it was compiled successfully. Now let's run it. Great, see everything printed out successfully. These are the elements in our array. If you look at this for loop shorthand, this is cleaner, it is more readable, and it is shorter than the traditional for loop. Here we have to specify the data type, and we have to specify the conditions and the update. But here we just use the for loop with our auto data type, then the variable, and we use the colon, not the semicolon. This time is the colon to loop through the array. So it prints out the elements in that array. So this is another way of using the for loop in C++. Let's do another example. Example 6. Just say make an attempt the for loop. I'm going to move this one towards the bottom so that the upper part of it will not be printed. For int make attempt equals 0 and semicolon, make attempt less than or equals 5 semicolon, make attempt plus plus, and the body of the for loop. Now the body of the for loop, see out, you have made attempts end line. Now let's save our code, compile it and run it. Great, it was compiled successfully. Now let's run it. Great, everything was run successfully. It says here you have made 0 attempts, 1 attempt, you've made 2 attempts, and it stopped when it got to 5 attempts. This is based on the condition that we specified in our for loop. Let's do one more example, and I will call it example 7. Display some numbers squared using a for loop in C++. Let me move this one to the bottom. Display some numbers squared using a for loop in C++ in an interactive form. We will allow the user to enter some data. See out. Number entered by the user squared. We are going to create some variables here. Int starting number, int ending number. Let me add some comments here. The starting number, the ending number. The user will be able to enter a starting number and an ending number. See out. Enter a starting number end line, cin, starting number, cout, enter and ending number, and cin, ending number, cout, numbers, put some spaces in here, squared, end line, cout, just put some dashes there, that'll be too much. End line. Now the for loop, for int num equals what? Equals starting number, semicolon, num less than or equals ending number, semicolon, num plus plus, and the body cout num let's put some tabs here, num multiplied by num, end line, semicolon. So what is actually going on here? Here we have a message on the screen, cout, number entered by the user squared. That's what we are going to print out on the screen. And we created two variables, int starting number, int ending number. Cout enter a starting number, which is going to prompt the user to enter a number. Cin starting number, that is the number they enter. Then cout enter an ending number. This will also prompt the user to enter a number where it will stop. Then cin, the ending number. Now cout number squared, this one will be printed on the screen, these dotted lines below them. And this is the actual code for the for loop. We have a variable here of data type int, and it is assigned the starting number which they are going to enter. Then the test condition here is if num, this variable here, is less than or equals to ending number, then update it num plus plus. So cout num, then tab, num multiplied by num, we multiply the numbers. Now let's test our code. Great, it was compiled successfully. Now let's run it. Great, it was run successfully. Now it says number entered by the user squared, enter a starting number. I'm going to enter 4, hit enter. Now it says enter an ending number. I'm going to enter 15. Great, so if you look at it now, it says here number squared, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared 25, and 15 squared is 225. This is based on the condition we set in our for loop and the values that are entered when I tested it. This is another way of doing a for loop in C++. So in this video, we have looked at the for loop in C++, the different types of for loops, the traditional method of writing a for loop in C++, the other method of using a shorthand, which has been available since C++ 11. We also looked at the ways you can use multiple variables in a for loop in C++, that is by using commands to separate some variables. I hope you've learned something from this video. Please like our video, subscribe to our channel. Bye for now.